Dear Journal, I destroyed xenofamilial relationships. Oh, and I might be going crazy. After 2 sleeping periods, I've stopped even trying to keep track of the days. My body had finally decided to end its extended vacation and start responding to my commands. I felt weak, probably because the only thing I've been fed so far was fucking salad. But I was able to get out of the unnecessarily high bed. I'm only 175 centimeters tall, so I was going to have to get used to an environment where the next sentient being closest to my height was almost a meter taller than me. The gravity on the ship was noticeably weaker than what I was used to, which only confirmed my earlier suspicions about being on a ship, but it also helped with the short drop from the bed. Once I decided that I was able to walk without much trouble, I jumped back onto my bed and waited for Dink to show up with my meal. That's the other reason I think I'm feeling weak. Last sleeping period he only gave me 1 meal, if it could be called that. He only gave me half of one of those large shoe boxes and then started to take it away. I tried to use my newly liberated arms to keep him from taking it, but they were still unbelievably sluggish in responding, and he managed to snatch it away in time. Whoa there, Dink, I wasn't finished there. You can't expect me to be a fool after a 1/9 of a serving of lettuce. I'm not a rabbit, damn it. I'm a grown man, and I need my lettuce. Or better yet, do you have some meat? I'd love some meat if you have any. I told you I was going crazy. 3 weeks of hearing nothing but chitters from the grey Yodas and clicks from the blue giraffes is bound to make a guy start talking to himself, if for no other reason than to hear something he understands. Dink apparently hadn't been impressed by my outburst, and he had clicked reproachfully. If he had gotten a newspaper and tried to swamp me with it, I wouldn't have been half surprised, but thankfully he didn't know how to properly train a pet. Good thing too, since there was only so much I was willing to endure in order to get food and water. I waited for what seemed like an hour, but was probably only about 10 minutes before Dink entered my room with 2 of those shot glasses filled with water and a shoebox of lettuce. Oh great, I was hoping for the lettuce again. Nothing sets my mouth on watering like a good crisp piece of lettuce. You even brought me a few gulps of water, just how I like it. You know me so well. I had decided that since they couldn't understand me, I might as well make the best of my situation and lace everything I said with sarcasm. Despite the repetition, I decided to eat the lettuce. It was the same box he had used yesterday, and there was no reason to try and snatch it out of his hands since there was only half of it left. I drank every last drop of water from the 2 glasses, holding the second one out with a pleading gesture. Maybe he understood, maybe he didn't. It didn't matter either way, as he merely clicked something at me and started retreating back to the door. Fine then, I'll just find my own lettuce and water, I muttered, and is retreating back. I waited a few minutes after he had left, then jumped back down from the bed. I walked over to the door. It had an oddly shaped but easily recognisable door handle mechanism, and when tested, wasn't locked. After all, who bothers locking their dog into a room? Luckily, I had 2 things dogs don't have: brains and thumbs. Grinning mischievously, I jumped at the handle, which was about 25 centimeters above my head. To my astonishment, my jump carried me past easy reach of the handle and peaked when I was approximately a meter off the ground. Even in my weakened state, I was still able to jump ridiculously high in this lowered gravity. Adjusting for my newfound basketball skills, I hopped, turned the handle, and began to explore my new home. Are you sure I can't give him more food? Whined Vitiv. He really seems to be hungry. He keeps looking at the box like he wished there was more in it. Absolutely not, snapped Tunzft. Vitiv had known it was a mistake to go to Dzv with this question. He seemed to think had killed all their scientists on that ship 3 days ago, as if he could. He barely even moved. Vitiv didn't want to say it, but he was definitely feeling the excitement of owning a pet starting to fade, especially such a lazy pet. He was hoping that if he could get him more food, maybe he'd show a little more life. After all, he had certainly started moving more since that first day with the 5 storage containers, although feeding himself and trying to grab the container away from Vitiv was not a significantly large improvement. Still, Vitiv had been impressed with Kukuta's speed as he had grabbed at the box. Vitiv almost hadn't gotten it away in time. If you start feeding it more food, it will begin to feel entitled to it, and then we'll have it eating us out of house and hull. I'll not have our resources drained because you don't know when to say no. Vitiv should have just waited until Zrr had woken up, so he could have asked her the question. At least she recognised that was a he and not an it. Tunst, comlink bleat, signalling an incoming call. What is it? He half-clicked, annoyed. Sturk, one of the gardeners in the hydroponics bay, could be heard from the other side of the comlink. Sorry to bother you, but that thing we brought onto the ship a few days ago, what does the kid call it? Shouted Vitiv into his father's receptor before could say anything. He glared at Vitiv, but didn't contradict him. Right, well, you gave him the right name, kid. He's in the hydroponics bay with us right now, and it looks like he's aiming to eat every curriculum leaf we have. He's already stripped 3 whole plants. It's halfway for his 4th. He's been making these weird groaning and spitting sounds the whole time, too. What do you want us to do? He looks pretty determined, and I don't want to touch him. He's filthy. Just don't let it leave, growled Tz, looking murderous. I'll be right there. He sprang from his favourite chair, left his quarters, and stalked towards the aft of the ship, where the hydroponics bay was located. Vitiv knew what kind of temper Tz could have when provoked, and he knew he harboured no love for Sometimes Vitiv wondered if Tz even liked him. Vitiv quickly ran to Zr's quarters. He didn't care if he had to wake her up. She was the only one who seemed to defend if only for his sake. Sorry about scaring you there, mates, but a guy can't live off half a shoebox of lettuce a day, can he? No sirree, he needs a good 5 boxes. That's what my mum always told me. 5 boxes of alien lettuce a day helps you keep the pangs of starvation away, or something like that. The blue giraffes who were watching me warily didn't seem to appreciate my humour. I knew I wasn't that good, but they could have at least pretended to be amused. I think they were the caretakers, since they had been watering various alien plants when I peeked inside. Through my explorations, I had decided this was a cargo ship, as the majority of the ship was merely massive rooms piled high with crates with blue giraffe writing on them. One of the rear cargo bays, though, seemed to have been converted into a hydroponics bay, which hinted at how long this ship took between ports. Thankfully, the gardeners had seemed too surprised or too scared of me to try and stop me, as I found a plant with familiar-looking leaves and began to trim it down. I guess each shoebox had held 1 plant's worth of leaves, because I went through 3 of them and was still hungry. I guess lettuce doesn't keep you as full as meat, which is a shame since I was beginning to think there wasn't any meat on this entire ship. I was 3/4 of the way through my 4th plant when the door burst open and one of the adults who had been arguing by my bedside tore into the room. Well, he galloped, flailed at a leisurely pace, but from the looks of it, he was giving it all he had. I didn't need to understand his clicks to know that he was angry, especially since he was gesticulating wildly at the 3 barren plants to my right and the broken off leaf in my hand. After a while of shout-clicking and waving his arms about, he felt silent, glaring at me as though waiting for a response. I saw no reason to refuse him one. I know how bad this looks, but let me assure you, I'm not the rabbit human you're looking for. It's almost like he knew that what I had said was a poor attempt at a joke, because he burst into another click rant. Just before I was sure he was going to spit me to death, the other adult who had been arguing that night entered my room, followed by Dink. The 2 adults started arguing again, which I was beginning to think was the defining factor in their relationship, and Dink shuffled over to me. He looked at the strip plants with what I could have sworn was respect, and then turned a disappointed stare on me. I almost felt a little ashamed. Look, Dink, you have to understand, I need more than just a few 100 grams of lettuce to keep me alive. I know you don't know any better, but if we're going to be living together, we need to get some things straightened out between us. Like how often and how much I need to eat and drink. My placatory speech was lost on him, though, and I turned my attention back to the arguing adult blue giraffes. The situation seemed to be degenerating. I couldn't tell you why, but I got a bad vibe from the first one that had entered the room. He reminded me of my dad, who had yelled at me when I had tried to help him mow the lawn when I was too small to safely operate the old and heavy push mower. I had been hoping to surprise him when he got back from work, since he hated mowing the lawn when he got back home after a long day. To help me move the mower, I had activated its automatic drive function, but it had gotten away from me and driven off into the garden before I could take off the clip, which had held the stop lever. When he'd seen the state the garden was in, he had been so furious I had hid in my closet rather than go face him during dinner. I don't know why, but I felt the same temper and reckless mannerisms from this blue giraffe, which earned him the nickname I'd given my father when I was young. Severus. If Severus had been angry before, he was livid now. Some of his gesticulations threatened to make him lose his balance. The other adult, however, wasn't having any of Severus's shit from the looks of it. She was giving Severus the same look of disappointment Dink had given me, albeit a little less condescending. She was so much like a mum that I couldn't help but name her Mama Giraffe. Something Severus said made Dink's ears perk up. That led him to join the spitting contest, which served to only enrage Severus even more. He started directing his anger at Dink. I understood a father's anger all too well and moved to redirect it onto me. Whoa, cool your jets there, Severus. It's not Dink's fault that... I guess Severus was closer to losing control than I had, though, because my sudden insertion into the conversation made Severus whirl around in rage, his eyes thunderbolts. Then he surprised us all. He aimed a kick at me. I'm sorry to say I wasn't quite sure what he was doing there first, and so I didn't dodge it. It didn't matter. His three-toed foot connected with my shoulder. I didn't move. It felt like a high school freshman had punched me in the arm. That wasn't what made me angry, though. I was a dog to this creature, an unthinking animal that had no idea what was expected of it. It didn't matter that he was mistaken, the fact that he believed it, which made the act the same as if any man had kicked his dog. Now you've pissed me off, I growled, staring at Severus. You're lucky I don't know how to grow these plants, or drive this ship, or take care of myself out here, or I might actually take you up on that fight. As it is, fuck off. I shoved his foot, which had fallen close to my side when I hadn't moved. My push sent it shooting out from under him, as though I had tackled his leg. I hadn't meant to push that hard, but it worked out. He used his other 3 legs to catch himself, but the rage seemed to have been replaced by fear. Mama Giraffe and Dink were staring at me too, as were the gardeners. I didn't know what to do then, so I went back to my room, jumped onto the bed and berated myself for making an enemy out of the blue giraffe who was most likely the captain of the ship I was staying on. After Koollman left the hydroponics bay, everyone present breathed a sigh of relief, Tunt's most noticeable among them. Well, I won't say that wasn't a surprise, finally clicked into the silence. But you had it coming, Tunt. What were you about, kicking him? He didn't know why you were angry. He doesn't know that he shouldn't pick half the cooked plants in the hydroponics bay clean. He was hungry, so he went in search of food. He just seems to need a lot of it, though where he puts it is beyond me. We'll just have to find a way to get more food for him since we're keeping him. At the last part, spluttered. Keeping it? Did you just see what it did? It acted as though my kick was only a slight breeze, then threw my leg with almost a casual push. It's rid half our cooked plants. I'd be surprised if any more of them grew back. It's fulfilled all the qualifications of our last conversation about keeping it and more. Did you see the look it gave me? I've never felt such a predatory glare before in my life. And with its unprecedented strength, I'm more sure than ever that it was responsible for what happened to the courty science vessel. Maybe he was, replied firmly. But if he is responsible, then he didn't do it without reason. You know how the courty are. Their eugenics program removed every shred of empathy and compassion they had. They'd look better than the monsters they study. As for how I know any of his actions were justified, you should look at yourself. I now have no doubts that if Koollman had wanted to do to you what happened to those courty scientists, he could have. All he did was return the exact same thing you did to him, which is rather impressive restraint for an unthinking animal if you ask me. He only started making those threatening noises when you began shouting at Vitiv. I think it's just protective of the one that feeds him. Maybe you should look at him and follow his example, such as not shouting at your son when he did nothing wrong. None of us know anything about this creature and surprises are bound to happen. Or did you forget how quickly he filled the scented waste bin we placed in the medical bay for him to do his business in? Regardless, your behaviour today has ensured that we're keeping him, since I have a feeling it may one day be useful to have an animal who is protective of our son, and able to knock the legs out from under with a mere push, don't you? With that, Zug turned and swept out of the room, Vitiv behind her, head down. She did not often give direct orders, but when her children were involved, there were no illusions as to who was in command. Before she was completely out of the room, Zur turned to Vitiv with a stern look on her face. One thing needs to change with Koollman, though, dear. You absolutely must get him a bath. I don't care if he won't let you put him in water. Throw it at him if you have to. He smells. Looks absolutely revolting.